I didn't move to East Texas for drama. I moved here for silence, for mornings that smell like rain and coffee, not lawsuits. But on my first week of retirement, a white envelope showed up in my mailbox, demanding $100,000 from an HOA that didn't even exist out here. That was the moment I knew. Someone was trying to steal my land on paper. I bought the place outright, 90 acres of peace, a few miles past the last gas station, where the asphalt gives up and the red dirt takes over. The kind of property you don't find online. You find it by talking to old men at diners. It took me 3 years of saving and 30 years of working to afford it. No mortgage, no fine print, just freedom. Or so I thought. The mailbox was still the old cast iron type, paint flaking, numbers half gone. That morning I walked down with my coffee, expecting bills or feed catalogs. And there it was, an envelope, pure white, bold red letters across the front. Urgent HOA notice. At first I laughed. Out here, there's no HOA, unless you count the coyotes. The nearest subdivision was miles away. But the letter was real enough. Heavy paper, embossed seal, a tone that reeked of authority. Dear property owner, it began, our records show that your parcel, Lot 27C&B, falls under the jurisdiction of Pine Hollow Estates Homeowners Association. Due to 30 years of unpaid dues, assessments, and penalties, your current balance is $140.97. Failure to remit payment may result in foreclosure or enforcement actions as outlined under association bylaws. I read it twice. Then once more, slower. The number didn't even make sense. I'd bought this land clean, cash on the barrel, from a ranching family that had owned it since the 1960s. I'd read every deed, every filing, no liens, no encumbrances, nothing. And yet, here it was. A ransom note, dressed up in legal stationery. The signature at the bottom read Karen Livingston, President. It was the kind of signature that curled at the end like a snake's tail. The tone between the lines was worse, polite, confident, entitled. I could almost hear her voice saying it. You must have made a mistake. We're just collecting what's fair. I took a sip of coffee that suddenly tasted burnt and bitter. Somewhere down the pasture, my 2 dogs barked at nothing, the way dogs do when they sense a storm before you do. I set the cup down and went back inside. Pulled the old rotary phone off the wall, the one I'd wired up just for nostalgia, and dialed the number listed on the letter. 3 rings, then a voice, sweet, syrupy, rehearsed. Thank you for calling Pine Hollow Estates HOA. Please leave a message for Karen or one of our board members. Have a blessed day. I hung up. Then I wrote my own letter. It was short, sharp, and notarized. I stated, in plain, irrefutable language, that my property was not, and had never been, under any HOA jurisdiction. I attached a copy of my title deed, parcel report, and a screenshot from the official county boundary map showing Pine Hollow Estates stopped 1.5 miles south of my fence line. I even cited the state property code for private landowners, just for seasoning. Then I mailed it certified with return receipt. By the time I dropped it off at the post office, the sky had turned the color of tarnished silver, and thunder was building over the hills. I remember thinking, that'll be the end of it. They'll see the paperwork, realize they screwed up, and leave me alone. But that's not how people like Karen Livingston operate. They don't retreat. They escalate. 3 days later, another envelope arrived. Thicker this time, and that's when I realized the first letter wasn't a mistake. It was a warning shot. I tore the thick envelope open right in there at the kitchen table. No return address this time, just a red stamp that said, Final Notice. Inside was a folded, color-printed map, fresh ink, crisp lines, the kind of fake authority that smells like toner and arrogance. At the top it read, Updated Boundary Plan, Pine Hollow Estates, adopted 2016. I spread it out flat beneath the yellow light. The bright red outline of their community now stretched well beyond the last subdivision road, crawling north across open pasture, all the way into my ranch, right through my fence line. According to this map, my land now belonged to them. I studied it for a long minute, letting that quiet fury settle in. They hadn't filed a lien. They hadn't even gone through the county. They'd just drawn a new border and hoped no one would notice. That's when I walked back to my study and spun the dial on my safe. Inside was a thick leather binder, the kind with metal rings that creak when you open it, filled with every document that mattered. The smell of old ink, carbon copy, and dust hit me like memory. This was my proof, my weapon. I laid it out on the table next to their fake map. Truth on one side, fiction on the other. And I thought to myself, you really picked the wrong man to lie to. I've spent my whole life reading what other people ignore, the fine print. When you spend 25 years chasing financial fraud, you learn that crooks hide in commas. They live in the white space between words. That's where they think the rules stop mattering. So when I bought this ranch, I didn't trust anyone's summary. I went back through 60 years of county records. Deeds, plat maps, mineral filings, every dusty microfilm that still existed. Those reels smelled like glue and age and somebody's long-forgotten cigarette smoke, but I read them all. 3 decades of maps, and everyone told the same story, same fences, same boundaries, same surveyor stamp. No association ever touched this land. If a previous owner had owed anything to an HOA, it would have left a mark, a lien. And a lien is like a shadow. Once it exists, it sticks to the land until someone clears it. This land had no shadow. That's why the first letter didn't scare me. It insulted me. They weren't just wrong. They were pretending I wouldn't know the difference. I still remember the day I signed the closing papers. The title agent, young kid, shiny shoes, nervous as a preacher's son in a bar, asked if I wanted extended HOA coverage. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Son," I said, "there's no HOA out here. Not unless the cows start holding board meetings." He chuckled, checked the box marked "not applicable," and handed me the pen. Now, months later, here I was staring at a fake map that said otherwise. Their red boundary line ran right through my pasture, over my creek, and up to my barn like a blood stain. I turned the map sideways, upside down. Didn't matter. It was still a forgery, and an arrogant one at that. I picked up my binder again, flipped to the title chain. 6 owners back, notarized, filed, and clear. No encumbrances, no association. Every page another nail in their coffin. And still, the thought that someone sat in an office clicking save as on a file that rewrote reality, that's what made my stomach twist. Because I knew this kind of fraud. I'd seen it 1,000 times in corporate ledgers and doctored bank statements. It always starts the same. Someone with power, convinced no one will call their bluff. Well, I was about to. I took a red marker and drew a clean line around my property, the real one, right across their counterfeit. Then I wrote in bold block letters across the bottom, "Not under HOA jurisdiction, ever." I scanned both pages into my computer, timestamped them, saved multiple copies, and uploaded them to cloud storage. Old habits die hard. You document everything before the liars start erasing. Then I sat back, staring at both maps side by side. Mine, honest and scarred with age. Theirs, shiny and false. Paper against paper, ink against ink. One telling the truth, the other trying to steal it. Out on the porch, thunder rolled low and distant. The dogs barked again, uneasy. Storm's coming, I thought, and it wasn't just in the sky. I knew right then this wasn't confusion. It was a setup. Someone had crossed a line that didn't belong to them, and now they'd drawn me into their map. Well, they could draw whatever they wanted. Lines on paper don't change the truth beneath the soil. But what they didn't know yet was that this time, the man they tried to bully with documents was better with paperwork than any of them. The next morning, I drove into town with that fake map riding shotgun beside me, folded neat, sitting there on the passenger seat like a smug liar. The paper still smelled like toner and deceit. I'd stared at it so long the night before, the colors were burned into my eyelids. East Fork County doesn't have a real downtown, just a courthouse that looks too big for its parking lot, a diner that serves the same coffee since Eisenhower, and the records office wedged between a bail bonds shop and a nail salon. It's the kind of place where the carpet's been replaced by duct tape, and the ceiling fan spins like it's tired of its job. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of paper, humidity, and time. A young clerk sat behind the counter, mid-20s, round glasses, the energy of a tranquilized possum. He looked up, cautious. "Can I help you, sir?" I slid the fake map across the counter. "I need an official copy of whatever this is supposed to be." He squinted, frowning a little. "That doesn't look familiar." "That's because it's not," I said. "It's a forgery." He blinked like I'd just confessed to robbing a bank. Sir, we don't use that kind of language here." I leaned in slightly, voice steady but cold. I spent 25 years at the IRS, son. I can smell fraud through 3 layers of toner and bad intentions. He gave me a nervous nod and started typing, 2 fingers pecking at the keyboard. The screen reflected in his glasses, a pale glow flickering across his face. After a moment, he clicked something. There, he said, turning the monitor toward me. The real county map came up. Same plat number, same coordinates. And just like I remembered, the HOA boundary stopped a good 1.5 miles south of my property. He looked from one map to the other. These don't match at all. See? The official one has a surveyor's stamp and a county filing number. This one, he tapped the fake printout, doesn't have either. Check the metadata, I said. He hesitated, then clicked a drop-down menu. There it was. Created 2016, uploaded from Pine Hollow Sec Wi-Fi. He turned back to me, wide-eyed. That's the HOA's office network. I nodded. And now it's a felony. Before I could think on that any further, a voice spoke from behind me, rough, steady, older. Is that the parcel west of the preserve? I turned. There stood a man in his late 60s, sun-browned skin, denim shirt tucked into worn jeans, boots that had seen 1,000 survey sites. He carried a leather folio under one arm, the kind that looked like it had outlived a few trucks. I said, "It is. You familiar with it?" He extended his hand. Name's Samuel Hart. Used to be county surveyor till I retired 10 years back. I drew those lines myself, long before any HOA tried to play land baron. We shook hands. His grip was solid, the kind that comes from years of real work, not board meetings. "Tell me something, Mr. Hart," I said. "Did my land ever belong to Pine Hollow Estates?" He barked out a laugh that startled the clerk. "Hell no. They tried annexing that section back in '02. Some developer thought he could bully the old ranchers into signing. Judge threw it out before lunch. I testified. Any chance you ever signed an updated boundary after that?" Hart's eyes narrowed, sharp under the brim of his faded cap. "Son, I'd rather lick a cattle gate in August than sign anything for that HOA. He glanced down at the fake map and snorted. "That thing's a forgery. Wrong line weight on the borders, wrong seal placement, and whoever did it doesn't even know how to align a section corner. Amateurs." "Can you put that in writing?" I asked. Without another word, he opened his folio, pulled out a notepad and a small ink stamp. The pad was old, the kind that left a ghost of blue ink even when dry. He scribbled quick, his handwriting surprisingly elegant, then signed and stamped it. "Make sure the prosecutor sees this." "Prosecutor," I repeated quietly. We weren't even at a lawsuit yet, but the word fit. Hart nodded once, gathered his folio, and started for the door. Before leaving, he paused and said over his shoulder, "You catch 'em, son. Folks like that been stealing land since they learned how to print paper." When the door shut behind him, the room felt heavier somehow, like truth had just walked out with spurs on. The clerk looked at me, half whispering, "You're not the first one, you know. A couple of other landowners came in last year. Same story. They backed off before filing anything." I folded the maps, tucked Hart's statement inside my binder, and said, "Well, I'm not backing off." Outside, the air hit me like a furnace. Texas summer, late morning. I stood there on the courthouse steps, binder under my arm, the fake map burning in my pocket. The cicadas were screaming, and for a moment, the whole world sounded like static. That was when I realized, this wasn't just about my land anymore. This was a pattern. And I'd just found the first crack in it. The first thing I heard that morning wasn't the wind or the dogs. It was metal. A low, heavy clank, like someone setting a trap. When I stepped outside, the sun was just starting to crawl over the tree line. The air smelled of dew and iron. And right there, hanging across my front gate, was a brand new chain thick enough to stop a truck. A silver padlock the size of a grapefruit held it tight. Bolted into the post beside it, a shiny aluminum sign, property of Pine Hollow Estates, access restricted until debt resolved. I stood still for a long minute. The dogs barked, hackles up. I couldn't blame them. The message wasn't subtle. Pay or stay out. No phone call, no letter, just a damn chain on land I owned outright. I walked closer, running a hand over the metal, still warm from whoever installed it before sunrise. The padlock was new, hardware store fresh, plastic tags still half torn. They'd come out here in the dark, drilled holes, hung their sign, and driven off like thieves pretending to be landlords. I took a picture, then another. Evidence first. Always. Old habits die hard. Inside, I brewed coffee I didn't really want and called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher said she'd send someone out within the hour. I waited on the porch, binder beside me, camera still rolling. 45 minutes later, a tan Ford Explorer pulled up, dust cloud trailing behind it like Judgment Day. The badge on the door read East Fork County Sheriff's Office. The badge on the man read Deputy Allen. He stepped out slow, middle-aged, neatly trimmed mustache, mirrored sunglasses hiding everything else. His tone was practiced calm, the kind that usually means he's already decided you're the problem. "What seems to be the issue, sir?" I pointed at the gate. That's not theirs, that's mine. Somebody from Pine Hollow HOA came onto my land last night and locked it shut." He squinted at the sign, then back at me. "Are you sure this parcel isn't under their jurisdiction?" I almost laughed. "Deputy, I'm sure, and if you need proof, I've got it. Color copies, notarized, gift-wrapped." He hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. He knew them, maybe golfed with one of the board members, or maybe he'd just handled too many petty HOA complaints to see the difference anymore. "Well," he drawled, "they're claiming you're part of the association. Until the court says otherwise, I can't intervene in a civil dispute." "Civil?" I asked quietly. "They trespassed. They drilled into my post. They're blocking access to private property. That's not civil. That's criminal interference." He sighed, the kind of sigh that ends conversations. "I'm not removing that chain, Mr. Jarrett. If you've got an issue, you'll need to take it to court." Then he turned and walked back to his SUV like lunch was waiting. The Explorer rolled away, throwing dust over the sign. For a moment, the words "Property of Pine Hollow" disappeared in the haze. When the dust settled, the letters came back. So did my temper. Fine. If the law wouldn't move for me, I'd move the law myself. I grabbed my phone, called a tow truck company out of Tyler. Didn't tell them much, just that I had hardware blocking an entry. They didn't ask questions. An hour later, a flatbed rumbled up the drive. The driver, tattooed forearms, grinned like he'd seen this kind of nonsense before, looked at the gate, then at me. "You want this chain off quiet?" he asked. "Or with fireworks?" "Let's make it surgical," I said, "but I want it gone." He nodded, pulled a bolt cutter from the truck, long as a rifle, and clipped the lock clean through. The sound was crisp, final, like a verdict. Then he hooked the winch to the post, leaned on the lever, and yanked the entire sign, bolts, screws, and all, right out of the ground. 10 minutes later, the gate swung freely again. I paid cash, tipped heavy. Before he left, the driver glanced at the shredded sign lying in the dirt. "HOA trouble?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "They forgot who owns the dirt." That afternoon, I went to work the way I used to prep a case file. 3 motion-triggered cameras, one on the gate, one down the road, one hidden in an oak tree 20 yards off. A solar-powered floodlight mounted above the post. Anyone within 10 feet would light up like they'd stepped on a stage. I wired everything to back up automatically online. If they came again, I'd have them from every angle. By sundown, the place looked the same as always. Quiet pasture, fence posts glowing in the last light. But something fundamental had shifted. My land had been marked, violated. The old peace was gone, replaced by a sense of readiness, like standing guard in your own house. Before nightfall, I filed a formal complaint with the county prosecutor's office. Photos, timestamps, coordinates, Hart's statement, the fake map, everything. If they wanted a case, I just handed it to them with a ribbon on top. Then I sat on the porch with the dogs, watching that new floodlight blink alive as the sun disappeared. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like bait, and I was fine with that, because I knew she'd come back. And when she did, I wanted the cameras rolling. The first night after I set up those cameras, I slept like a soldier, light, half alert, the kind of sleep where every noise registers in your bones. The wind creaked the porch rail. A distant coyote howled, and sometime before dawn, one of the motion sensors pinged. A tiny chime from my phone, soft but sharp enough to cut through the dark. I didn't get up right away. Sometimes it's a raccoon, sometimes a deer nosing the fence. But when I checked the feed an hour later, the coffee went cold in my hand. There she was, Karen Livingston, 5:48 a.m. Yoga pants, windbreaker, flashlight in hand, marching right up to my front gate like she owned the world. The same gate she'd chained shut 2 nights before. The camera caught everything in clean, 1080p clarity. She stopped right where the chain used to hang, stared at the empty space for a few seconds. Then she looked straight at the camera, saw it, and gave it the finger. No words, just that. A slow, deliberate gesture that said, "I know you're watching, and I don't care." I paused the video right there, frame by frame, her face lit by the floodlight, eyes narrow, jaw tight. The expression of someone who's angry, not because they're right, but because they've been caught. I smiled, because that was the first moment she realized this wasn't going her way. I saved the clip, time-stamped it, backed it up in 3 different folders, and burned a copy to USB. Evidence, neat and tidy. Then I called the sheriff's office again, asked to speak to the evidence division. Different deputy this time, younger, polite, professional. He logged the footage, took my report, and gave me a case number. By then I thought maybe things would calm down. They'd seen I wasn't bluffing. They'd back off. But I was wrong. The next move wasn't a chain, or a sign, or a visit in the dark. It came in an envelope. The sound of tape ripping woke me up at 5 in the morning. Not loud, but wrong. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in the middle of nowhere. I grabbed my flashlight and the 9mm I kept by the bed, and stepped barefoot onto the porch. The air was thick and wet. The kind of fog that eats distance. I couldn't see the gate, just the faint shimmer of the floodlight through the mist. Then I heard it. Tires crunching gravel, slow, careful, retreating. By the time I made it down the drive, the car was gone. Only dust and silence remained. And on the gatepost, taped right in the center, a brown envelope flapping in the breeze. Typed label, no postage. I peeled it off and tore it open under the porch light. Inside was a single document. Notice to appear, East Fork County Civil Court. Defendant, Randall D. Jarrett. Cause, non-payment of HOA obligations. Hearing date, Friday, 7 a.m. Judge G. Livingston. I stood there staring at it, the name burning through my head. G. Livingston. It took a few seconds to remember why it sounded familiar. Then it hit me. Karen's ex-husband, a civil court judge, dead for 3 years. I'd read the obituary myself when I was digging into her background last week. Heart attack, 22. So, unless the afterlife had opened a branch courtroom in East Fork County, this was a fake. A new low, even for her. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at that notice. Thick paper, clean formatting, a font close enough to the counties to fool anyone who'd never seen the real thing. Even had an embossed seal, slightly off-center, but convincing at a glance. It was a good forgery. But I'd seen better. And I'd built cases around worse. I called the county clerk's office, asked for the records department, gave them the case number printed on the top corner. The woman on the phone checked, clicked, and said, "Sir, that number doesn't correspond to any active or archived case in our system. Can you tell me who Judge G. Livingston is currently assigned to?" A pause. Then softly, "Sir, Judge Livingston passed away 3 years ago." "Yeah," I said. "That's what I thought." I hung up and started laughing, not out of humor. It was the kind of laugh that comes when disbelief runs out of road and anger takes the wheel. Because now it wasn't just trespassing. It wasn't just fraud. It was impersonation of a dead judge, and that, in Texas, is criminal forgery. I slipped the document into a zip bag, along with the envelope and tape, and drove straight to the sheriff's department. The evidence officer took it from me with latex gloves, logged it, and promised a forensic report within a few days. When it came back, it told me everything I already knew, but with proof. Fingerprints, Karen Livingston. Inkjet pattern, Canon model registered to Pine Hollow HOA office. Paper type, identical to stock purchased by the same office 6 months ago. They might as well have signed it in blood. I compiled everything. The video of her at the gate, the forgery analysis, the fake map, Hart's notarized statement, and the boundary records from the county. It was enough to fill a binder, Exhibit B through Z. And as I slid the last sheet into its sleeve, something strange happened. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt steady. Like I'd shifted gears from survival to pursuit. The fear, the outrage, even the fatigue, all replaced by a quiet certainty. I'd seen people forge tax returns, death certificates, entire identities. But this woman, she'd tried to forge reality itself. And that kind of arrogance always ends the same way, with someone like me flipping on the light. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not the kind you find on billboards or daytime TV. This one came from a referral, a friend of mine in Tyler who still owed me a favor from a tax case years back. He said, "You need someone who doesn't scare easy. Call LaToya Ramirez. She eats HOAs for breakfast." He wasn't exaggerating. When LaToya picked up, her voice was calm and measured, the kind of calm that usually means the other side is about to have a very bad day. "Mr. Jarrett," she said, "I've reviewed what you emailed me. That's not civil harassment. That's a pattern of criminal conduct. You've got forgery, fraud, trespass, and obstruction of property rights, at minimum." "I figured as much," I said, "but I wanted airtight." She paused, like she was flipping through her mental Rolodex of options. "Then we start with injunctive relief, a court order stopping them from setting foot on your land again. After that, we attach fraud and harassment claims. And once the DA gets wind of that forged summons, we'll have leverage for criminal charges." I liked her already. We met that afternoon at a diner off Highway 31. She walked in carrying a leather briefcase and a sense of purpose that made the waitress move faster. Sharp suit, dark eyes, no patience for nonsense. I handed her the binder, the whole case file. She flipped through it while sipping burnt coffee that would have stripped paint. Didn't flinch once. When she reached the fake court notice, she smirked. "Well," she said, "this is new. Using a dead judge's name is a first, even for these HOA bullies." "I take it you've seen a few?" I asked. She chuckled softly. "More than I can count. They start out small. Parking fines, lawn citations, community integrity. Then they get a taste of control, and next thing you know, they're playing government with clipboards. But this," she tapped the forged document, "this is federal-level stupid." She slid the notice back into the sleeve and looked up at me. "Mr. Jarrett, if you'll authorize me, I'll file the injunction tomorrow morning. I'll also forward this entire binder to the county prosecutor's office. They'll want to see this before I even mention the words criminal forgery." I nodded. "Do it." She smiled, not friendly, not warm, but the kind of smile you'd see on someone who just spotted their prey in the brush. "Good," she said. "Then let's make her regret picking paper as her weapon." That night, I scanned and backed up every single page again. Old habit. Digital redundancy saves lives, or at least lawsuits. The next day, LaToya called. Her voice was brisk, confident. "Filed the motion first thing. The court accepted it. The prosecutor's office wants to meet you this afternoon. Assistant District Attorney Weaver will be handling the review." "Review for what?" I asked. "For possible criminal charges," she said simply. "You did your part. Now it's their turn." The ADA's office was a small building behind the county courthouse, brick, square, and utterly unimpressed by drama. Inside, Weaver turned out to be mid-40s, clean-cut, with the kind of eyes that measured people for truth, the way a rancher measures cattle. He shook my hand firmly. "Ms. Ramirez tells me you've stirred quite the hornet's nest, Mr. Jarrett." "I didn't stir it," I said. "I just didn't let it sting me." He grinned faintly. Then LaToya laid the binder on his desk and began walking him through the evidence like a surgeon explaining an X-ray. Map forgery, metadata, Hart's statement, the gate chain, the video footage, and finally, the fake summons, the crown jewel. Weaver leaned back, rubbing his chin. Fake court documents, false claim of debt, tampering with county records. "And she printed this from the HOA office printer?" LaToya nodded. He exhaled slowly. "Well, that makes it easy. I can open a criminal investigation today. We'll start with fraud, falsification of records, and criminal trespass. If the judge's name was used posthumously, we'll tack on identity misuse for good measure." I liked how he said "we." Sounded like the law was finally in the truck with me. As we left, LaToya turned to me, her heels clicking sharp against the courthouse tile. "You realize," she said, "when this hits, she's going to panic. People like her always do. She'll double down before she collapses." "Let her," I said. "Panic makes mistakes. Mistakes make evidence." LaToya smiled again, the same cold, predatory one from the diner. I can see why you worked in fraud, Mr. Jarrett. You think like a prosecutor. Old habits, I said. Can't help it. That night, I drove home under a heavy sky. The storm clouds over the pasture looked like bruises in the dark. Lightning flickered somewhere east, painting the fence line in silver. It felt like the land itself was waiting, coiled, tense. I parked the truck, walked up the drive, and paused at the gate. The floodlight clicked on, washing everything in white. The chain was gone, the post still scarred from where the sign had been ripped out. I stood there a long time, binder under my arm, and thought about what LaToya had said. Panic makes mistakes. Somewhere out there, Karen Livingston was realizing the same thing, that she'd crossed from harassment into crime, and this time she wasn't up against a neighbor. She was up against a man who made his living proving intent. The dog started barking again, short, sharp, urgent. I turned toward the tree line. A pair of headlights flickered on the road beyond the fence, then vanished. I didn't chase them. I just smiled, turned toward the house, and said quietly, "Run all you want, Karen. The paperwork's faster than you'll ever be." They called it the Forest Creek Unity Fair, a name so sweet it gave me cavities just reading it. Flyers were taped to gas pumps, feed store windows, even the door of the post office. Bright colors, smiling clip art families, promises of community togetherness. In fine print, under all that cheer, it read, "Special Presentation, The Future of Forest Creek Governance." Translation, Karen Livingston's Damage Control Tour. She was going to stand in front of the people she'd conned, smile through her teeth, and convince them she was still queen of the cul-de-sac. But she wasn't counting on me being there, or on what I'd brought with me. Saturday morning came warm and bright, a Texas kind of morning, where the heat starts early and the air hums with bugs and tension. The fairground wasn't much, just the HOA's parking lot, a few tents, some folding tables, and a half-deflated bounce house that leaned like a guilty conscience. I pulled up at 9:58 a.m. sharp. Jeans, clean boots, plain button-down shirt, not looking for a fight, but not hiding either. Under one arm, my black zippered portfolio. In the other, a slim portable monitor case. Beside me walked LaToya Ramirez, heels clicking sharp against the asphalt. No briefcase today. She carried a single envelope, the kind that only lawyers carry when the contents are heavier than they look. People were already milling around, families with kids, retirees holding styrofoam cups of lemonade, a few board members in their Sunday best, standing like sentries around the main tent. And in the center, under a white canopy trimmed with blue ribbon, stood Karen Livingston. She wore a cream blazer over a floral dress and the expression of someone running for re-election to a throne no one asked for. When she saw me, her smile froze for just a heartbeat, then came back, stretched and brittle. "Mr. Jarrett," she said brightly, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "so glad you could join us. Always happy to welcome new members to our community." "Don't worry," I said. "I won't stay long." LaToya said nothing. She just handed me the monitor cable like a magician passing the wand before the reveal. The fair kicked off with speeches. A board member droned about rebuilding trust and the importance of neighborly cooperation. Then Karen took the microphone, hands clasped like a politician about to forgive a scandal she caused. "We've faced many challenges this year," she began. "Misinformation, disrespect, even attacks on our integrity. But the Forest Creek HOA remains strong, united in purpose, proud in tradition." Applause scattered like weak rain. A few nods, mostly silence. Then came the part printed on the flyer. "Open concerns." Karen smiled toward the crowd. "If anyone wishes to speak, please remember to keep remarks brief and constructive." I raised my hand. Her smile faltered. "I'm sure we can make an exception for Mr. Jarrett," she said sweetly. "Though, technically, he isn't a member." LaToya stepped forward. "Under Texas Open Assembly law, any community meeting publicly advertised is open to attendees regardless of jurisdiction," she said flatly. Karen blinked. I stepped up beside her and set my monitor on the table. "Let's keep it brief," I said. "I brought pictures." The screen flickered to life, powered from the small generator beside the tent. First slide, timeline of HOA fraud and property interference, compiled by Randall D. Jarrett. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "This," I said, pointing, "is the official county boundary map. Filed, stamped, resorted. This," I tapped to the next image, is the one your president uploaded in 2016. Same coordinates, different lines, no authorization, no surveyor stamp, no filing number. Metadata shows it was uploaded using the HOA office Wi-Fi. A woman in the crowd whispered, "Good Lord." I clicked again. The next slide showed the forged court summons beside a newspaper obituary for Judge George Livingston. "Recognize the name?" I said, "because the man who supposedly signed this notice has been dead 3 years. The ink, however, is very much alive, printed from the HOA's office Canon printer." Gasps. Someone muttered, "She didn't." Karen stepped forward, voice tight. "This isn't the proper forum for—" "Then here's a better one," I said. I clicked again. Video playback. Karen at my gate, 5:48 a.m., giving the camera the finger. The crowd went dead silent. One of the older men in the back let out a single, incredulous laugh. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "The same morning she left a forged court notice on my fence," I said quietly. "Fingerprints confirmed. Inkjet trace confirmed. That's not rumor. That's record." Karen's smile disintegrated. She tried to speak, but the microphone betrayed her, squealed, then died. Latoya stepped forward, calm as a glacier. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client's evidence has been filed with both the county prosecutor and the district attorney. Criminal proceedings are pending. You'll be hearing from the state soon." The crowd shifted, murmurs building into something heavy. One woman folded her arms. A man near the front said loudly, "Is that why my dues went up?" Another shouted, "You fined me for a mailbox, you forged maps!" The sound swelled. Questions, accusations, disbelief. Karen raised her hands, pleading. "Everyone, please. This is misinformation. I can explain." "Then explain this," someone called. A younger man, face red with anger. He held up his phone, recording everything. "Go ahead, President Livingston. Tell us why you used a dead judge's name." For a moment, she just stood there, trembling, pale, trapped in her own theater. I shut the monitor off, closed the case, and said softly, "This isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone you scared into paying what you never earned." Then I walked out, the murmurs behind me rising into shouts. Latoya followed, heels tapping steady against the pavement. By the time we reached the truck, I could hear someone yelling for a board vote. Someone else demanded an audit. The crowd was eating its own tail. Latoya slid into the passenger seat, exhaled slowly. "Well," she said, "that escalated faster than I expected." I smiled, watching people swarm the tent behind us. "Karen wanted unity," I said. "Looks like she got it, just not the kind she planned." The board called a special meeting the following Thursday. 6 p.m. sharp, same community center as always. Beige walls, folding chairs, and the faint smell of old coffee and denial. After the disaster at the fair, Karen needed a stage to prove she still had control. I came to watch it burn. The sun was going down when I pulled into the lot. Half the town was already there, some out of curiosity, others out of anger. People talked in low voices, that tense buzz of a crowd waiting for a fight they didn't pay for. Latoya met me by the door, holding her laptop like a weapon. "You ready?" she asked. "I don't have to be," I said. "The truth's ready enough." Inside, the room filled fast. A row of fluorescent lights hummed overhead. On one wall hung a banner that read, "Rebuilding Trust Through Transparency." Irony must have been on sale that week. Karen entered right on cue, heels clicking, red blazer this time, pearl necklace, folder clutched like a lifeline. Her smile was mechanical, practiced, already cracking around the edges. When she took the microphone, her voice quivered just enough for anyone paying attention to hear. "Before we begin tonight's agenda," she said, "I'd like to address some recent accusations made against this association and myself personally. Much of what was presented at last weekend's event was misinformation, taken out of context, misinterpreted, or fabricated altogether." A few murmurs. A woman in the second row crossed her arms. A man in overalls shook his head. Karen pressed on. "It's deeply unfortunate that our community has been subjected to such hostility. We are simply trying to collect what is owed to the neighborhood, what is fair and right. No outsider will ever threaten what we've built here." Her voice rose a little too high on that last line. She looked straight at me when she said it. That was her big moment, her last speech before gravity caught up. The door at the back of the room opened. 2 deputies stepped in. East Fork County badges shining under the fluorescent light. Between them walked Assistant District Attorney Weaver, gray blazer, calm stride, the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to raise its voice. He didn't look left or right, just straight ahead. "Karen Livingston," he said, voice level and unhurried. "You are under arrest for fraud, filing false legal documents, tampering with public records, obstruction of property rights, and criminal trespass." For a second, the room didn't move. Then came the sound, a soft gasp, like the whole crowd exhaled at once. Karen blinked. Then she laughed, a high, brittle sound that didn't belong to a sane person. "You're kidding," she said. "This is absurd. This is harassment. I built this community." Deputy number 1 stepped forward. "Ma'am, please place your hands behind your back." Karen's eyes darted across the room, searching for help, for sympathy, for anything. But the faces staring back at her were stone. Even her inner circle, the treasurer, the secretary, wouldn't meet her eyes. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "This is my HOA." Deputy number 2 reached for her arm. She jerked back, nearly knocking over the microphone. "This is illegal, you can't—" The click of handcuffs cut her off, clean, metallic, final. Weaver waited for the noise to die. Then he handed a thick folder to one of the remaining board members. "You'll find in here copies of the evidence submitted by Mr. Jarrett," he said, "along with signed affidavits, court orders, and an authorization for immediate administrative audit of your organization. Several of you may be contacted for questioning." Karen twisted in the deputy's grip, hair falling loose, voice breaking. "You don't understand," she shouted. "I own this land. I made this place." Weaver didn't even look at her. He simply said, "No, ma'am, that's exactly the problem." They walked her out, the sound of her heels scraping against the linoleum. The door closed behind them with a dull, echoing thud. For a long moment, the room stayed silent. Then someone started clapping. Just one person, slow, deliberate. Then another joined in, and another, until the whole room was on its feet, the applause rising like thunder. Latoya glanced at me, smiling just enough. "Well," she said softly, "that escalated efficiently." I didn't smile back right away. I just stood there, letting the sound wash over me. Not pride, not triumph, something quieter, the kind of satisfaction that only comes when justice finally catches up to arrogance. When the applause faded, I walked to the front, picked up the microphone Karen had dropped, and said, "For anyone wondering what comes next, the county has what it needs. The HOA will be audited, and whatever's left of it will face restitution. For the first time in a long time, this neighborhood belongs to its people again." No applause this time, just quiet nods, tired faces, a sense of something ending, the kind of peace that follows a long storm. As we stepped outside, the air was cool and still. The sun had set, leaving the sky washed in violet and orange, the color of endings and forgiveness. Deputy cruisers idled near the curb, red and blue lights flashing soft against the community center wall. In the back seat of one of them, Karen sat motionless, hands cuffed, eyes empty. Latoya looked at her, then at me. "Closure feels different when you earn it, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said. "It's quieter." She nodded, then headed for her car. I stayed a minute longer, watching the cruiser pull away, taillights fading into the dark. The same dark she used to rule from. Then I turned toward my truck, the night air heavy with the smell of dust and justice, and thought, some people build fences, others build prisons. She just learned the difference. The morning after the arrest, the story hit the local news. They ran the headline in bold across the bottom of the screen. HOA president arrested in fraud scandal, forged court orders, and illegal maps uncovered. I watched it from my kitchen table, same spot where I'd first opened her fake summons. Coffee steaming, sunlight cutting through the blinds in golden stripes. The anchor's voice steady and detached, the way reporters talk when they're trying not to sound amazed. They showed everything. The map comparison, the footage of the forged document, even my gate camera clip. They blurred her face, but the gesture, that middle finger at dawn, didn't need a name tag. Then came the interviews, former residents, old HOA members, people I'd never met but who'd all lived the same story. Mysterious fines, unauthorized fees, vague threats of foreclosure. It was like watching termites crawl out of a rotten beam. You never realize how deep the rot goes until someone kicks the wall. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, neighbors, even strangers from 2 counties over. Most of them weren't angry anymore. They were relieved. Finally, someone had pulled the curtain back. A man named Doug Coleman called. He lived 2 streets inside the original HOA boundary. "I just want to thank you, Mr. Jarrett," he said. "I paid them for years. Dues, late fees, assessments. Every time I asked for a breakdown, they said the records were lost. Turns out, what was lost was their conscience." By evening, a small crowd had gathered at the community center again. No Karen this time, just residents, tired faces, paper cups of coffee, a quiet kind of unity. They wanted to know what came next. LaToya stood at the front, calm and deliberate. "Here's the reality," she told them. "The HOA board is suspended under state review. The prosecutor's office is handling the criminal side, but civil restitution, getting your money back, clearing fraudulent liens, that's going to take time, and that's where we come in." She looked around the room, maybe 40 people, maybe more, and added, "I'll be filing a class action lawsuit on behalf of any homeowner who was charged or coerced under false pretenses. We already have the evidence. Now we need the names." Hands went up across the room. Some shaking, some angry, some just tired. I stayed in the back, leaning against the wall, listening. It wasn't my fight anymore, not directly, but I felt something settle in my chest. Maybe pride, maybe peace, maybe both. Later that night, LaToya called me. Her tone was different, softer. "You did good, Randall," she said. "Most people would have folded. You didn't." "I've seen too many bullies win because decent folks didn't want the hassle," I said. "This one just happened to pick the wrong man to hassle," she laughed. "You know, when this is done, the damages could top 3 million. 37 households have joined so far." "Good," I said. "Make it hurt." Then there was a pause, long enough for me to hear the hum of her office air conditioner on the other end. "You ever think about why you still fight this hard?" she asked. "You're retired. You could have ignored it, written it off, moved away." I looked out across my pasture, the moon silver on the grass, the dogs sleeping by the steps. "Because," I said quietly, "you let one bully take your gate, and the next one will take your road, and the one after that will take your name off the map." She didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, "Remind me never to end up on your bad side," and hung up. The next few weeks felt strange, quiet but not empty. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the air still smells like rain and ash. Neighbors I'd never spoken to started waving as they drove by. Someone left a basket of biscuits on my porch with a note, "Thanks for standing up." Even the sheriff's department seemed to have learned humility. Deputy Allen drove by one morning, slowed down, tipped his hat, and kept going. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Karen's mugshot made the papers 2 days later. Her eyes were flat, expressions somewhere between rage and disbelief. She'd been denied bail on account of tampering with public records. I read the article once, folded it, and slid it into the binder with everything else. Exhibit Z, now complete. A week after that, LaToya sent me an email titled Update. It contained one sentence. "The court has accepted our class filing, case number C1149, Civil Division." Below it was a list of names, 37 plaintiffs, people who had lived under her rule for years, finally standing together. Their claims totaled just over $3 million. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the screen, and smiled. Not because of the money, because of what it meant. A reckoning that would outlive her mugshot. That night, I sat on the porch again. Same place, same quiet. The floodlight at the gate glowed steady, no longer a warning, just light. Somewhere in the distance I could hear laughter. Neighbors, maybe, free of the weight they didn't know they were carrying. I thought about everything that had happened. The letters, the chains, the fake maps, the forged court order, all the lies dressed up as authority. And I realized something. Karen hadn't just built an HOA. She'd built a system of fear. One signature, one fine, one fake rule at a time. And all it took to end it was someone willing to say no. I closed my eyes and listened to the crickets. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I could still hear Hart's gravelly voice. Folks like that been stealing land since they learned how to print paper. He was right, but paper cuts both ways. And for the first time in a long time, East Fork County felt honest again. 6 months passed before the final hearing. By then, the world had moved on. But around Forest Creek, the echoes still lingered. Empty mailboxes where HOA notices used to pile up, fences with fresh paint but no fear behind them. The air felt lighter. Even the cicadas seemed less angry. The courtroom that day was small, oak benches polished by generations of restless hands, flags faded from sunlight. I sat in the second row beside LaToya, watching people file in. The 37 plaintiffs she represented, each one carrying their own quiet history with that HOA. Some looked nervous, some looked determined. All of them looked free. At the front sat Judge Cardenas, sharp eyes behind half-moon glasses, hair white as fence dust, posture straight as a plumb line. She didn't say much when the session began, just nodded to the clerk and said, "Let's get to it." LaToya stood, calm as always. "Your Honor," she began, "we're here on behalf of 37 homeowners subjected to fraud, coercion, and illegal assessments under the organization known as Forest Creek Estates Homeowners Association. We seek dissolution of said entity, restitution of unlawfully collected funds, and personal liability for its acting officers." She handed over the binder, the same one that had followed me from my kitchen table to the sheriff's office and beyond. I swear the thing had grown heavier, like truth itself had weight. The defense table was mostly empty. Only one of Karen's former board members showed up, pale, sweating, eyes down. The rest had resigned, vanished, or fled the state. Karen herself was absent, awaiting sentencing in county jail. Judge Cardenas opened the binder, flipped through the exhibits slowly. The maps, the forged summons, the metadata, Hart's statement. She didn't ask for explanation. She didn't need one. Every page told its own story. Finally, she set the papers down and folded her hands. "I've reviewed the evidence thoroughly," she said. "This court finds that the entity known as Forest Creek Estates HOA acted with gross misconduct and fraudulent intent. Its incorporation charter is hereby revoked. Its accounts are frozen pending distribution. All property, vehicles, and assets held under its name are to be liquidated and used to repay affected residents in full." The gavel came down once, solid, final, no theatrics, just the clean sound of justice being filed and stamped. Outside, the air felt brand new. Neighbors stood together on the courthouse steps, shaking hands, hugging, laughing, the kind of laughter that's half joy, half disbelief. LaToya looked exhausted but radiant, like a general after a long campaign. $3.1 million, she said, flipping through her notes. Every cent accounted for, refunds, damages, attorney fees, and the state's keeping the rest for fraud restitution. "Not bad," I said. "Could almost make a man believe in the system again." She smiled faintly. "Don't go soft on me now, Randall." "I won't," I said, "but I might buy something." 2 months later, there was an auction, the official liquidation of Forest Creek assets, trucks, furniture, office supplies, even the HOA van Karen had bought for herself under community transport budget. But the prize of the day was the old office building, a single-story stucco box with sun-bleached paint and bad history baked into the drywall. I showed up with cash in hand. When the auctioneer called for bids, no one wanted it, not after everything that had happened. I raised my paddle once. No one countered. "Sold," the man said. Just like that. The place looked smaller than I remembered, one desk still sitting where Karen's empire had ruled, a faded Integrity First banner drooping behind it. The silence was perfect. I gutted it down to the studs, painted the walls a soft sage green, hung wide windows that opened to the sound of the wind, not control. And 3 months later, I opened the doors again, under a new name, the Jarrett Center for Rural Property Rights. 3 rooms, one for legal workshops on land use and ownership, one for free consultations with volunteer attorneys, and one room filled with scanned plat maps, survey archives, and printed records anyone could access. No red tape, no gatekeepers. The first visitor was a man in overalls, hands rough from fieldwork, hat crushed from habit. He shook my hand hard and said, "If this had existed 3 years ago, I wouldn't have had to sell my goats." I laughed. "Tough business, goats," he nodded. "Yeah, tougher when an HOA fines you for keeping them." I told him he could host a workshop any time. He said he might just do that. By the end of that week, the walls were covered in thank you notes, scrawled messages, faded photos, county deeds finally cleared of false liens. The place had a heartbeat now, not bureaucracy, community. One afternoon, I stepped outside with a cup of real lemonade, not the powdered kind the HOA used to serve at their fake events. The metal plaque by the door gleamed in the sunlight. This land is not ruled by fear, fake maps, or forged threats. This land is free. I stood there a while, listening to the wind through the oaks. For the first time since I'd moved here, it didn't feel like I was defending something. It felt like I was keeping it alive. Sometimes, when the sun goes down and the light hits the gate just right, I still see the reflection of that old chain, the one they used to lock me out of my own land. And every time I see it, I remember what my father used to say. A man's boundaries are only as strong as his backbone. I think about that a lot now, and I figure the same goes for a country. The first year after the verdict was quiet, not silent, just the kind of quiet that means peace has finally unpacked its bags and decided to stay a while. The phone stopped ringing. No more notices, no more threats, no more envelopes marked urgent. The only mail I got now were thank you cards, and a few flyers for farm equipment auctions. I liked it that way. The Jarrett Center for Rural Property Rights settled into a rhythm. Mondays were for open hours. Farmers, ranchers, widows with land deeds folded like family Bibles. Wednesdays, we held workshops on how to read county plats and spot fraudulent filings. Fridays, the local high school sent volunteers to digitize old maps. The smell of coffee and paper filled the air like something holy. Every time I walked through the door, I felt like I'd built a church for the one thing that never lies: documentation. Beth ran the front desk now, young, sharp, polite, the kind of person who could disarm a room with patience. She'd grown up in Forest Creek, used to be fined for putting up Halloween decorations before October. Now she was the one helping people take back what was rightfully theirs. One afternoon in early spring, I looked out the window and saw 3 trucks parked out front, dusty Chevys and an old Ford, all with homemade signs in the back that said things like "Property rights matter" and "No HOA beyond this point." A group of neighbors had gathered under the oak tree by the signpost, sharing lemonade and laughter. I stepped outside, and one of them waved me over. "Mr. Jarrett," he said, "we were just talking about you." That's usually how trouble starts, but he was smiling. "We were thinking," he continued, "about forming a co-op, not an HOA, nothing with rules or dues, just neighbors helping neighbors, fixing fences, checking wells, watching out for one another. You think that's a good idea?" I smiled. It's the best idea there is, so long as no one gets a title like president. They all laughed, and someone handed me a cup of lemonade, cold, sweet, with a slice of real lemon floating on top. Not powdered, not processed, just honest. By midsummer, the center had visitors from as far as Oklahoma and Arkansas. People heard about it online, in small papers, through word of mouth. They came to learn how to protect their property, to read deeds and maps, to understand that land isn't just soil, it's identity. A quiet kind of movement started growing, one built on self-reliance and truth. Sometimes I'd watch them from the porch, farmers in boots, veterans with caps that read Korea or Vietnam, young couples with babies on their hips, all walking through those doors, leaving a little stronger than they came in. I never charged a dime, didn't need to. What I got back was worth more than any fee. One evening, Beth called out from her desk. "Mr. Jarrett, there's a young man here to see you." I looked up from the ledger. He was maybe 20, tall, nervous, carried a folder like it was heavier than it should be. "Sir," he said, "my dad told me to come here. Our land's been in the family since '54, but some developers claiming part of it belongs to a green zone expansion." He hesitated. "I don't even know where to start." I smiled, motioned him toward the big map table. "You start right here," I said. Then I handed him a magnifying glass and a pen. "Let's read the land together." We spent 2 hours tracing lines, comparing survey marks, matching deeds to coordinates. By the time he left, he knew more about his property than most county clerks. As he walked out, he turned and said, "My granddad would have liked you, sir. Said the world used to have more men like this." I told him, "The world still does. They just need to be reminded." That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the center. The sun had gone down, but the windows still glowed gold from the streetlight. On the wall hung the metal plaque I'd had made the week we opened. It read, This land is not ruled by fear, fake maps, or forged threats. This land is free. I ran my hand along the words, feeling the cool metal under my fingers. Sometimes I wondered if all of this, the fight, the letters, the courtroom battles, had been worth it. Then I'd look at that plaque and remember, it wasn't just about one ranch or one man. It was about everyone who had ever been told you don't own what's yours. Before heading home, I walked down the path toward the gate. The floodlight clicked on, bathing the road in white. The grass was tall, waving soft in the evening breeze. The chain was long gone, but I still kept the broken padlock, framed on the wall inside my office. A reminder of what happens when lies meet daylight. The dog stirred near the porch as I closed the gate behind me. In the distance, a whip-poor-will called once, then again. Somewhere beyond the pasture, thunder rolled, gentle and low. Rain was coming, the good kind, steady and honest, the kind that makes the land forgive you for digging too deep. I took a deep breath and smiled, because for the first time in a long time, this place didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home. Time doesn't move fast out here. It just changes direction when you're not looking. It's been 5 years since the courthouse gavel came down. 5 years since the day fear left this soil. The Jarrett Center still stands. Green paint a little faded now, sign creaking soft in the wind. The coffee's weaker, the chair's older, but the purpose hasn't aged a bit. Beth runs the place full-time these days. Doesn't need me to hover. She's sharper than I ever was. Knows the law, the land, and the people. Half the county calls her before they call their lawyer. She keeps the same plaque by the door. This land is not ruled by fear, fake maps, or forged threats. This land is free. Every so often she catches me staring at it and says, "Thinking about repainting it, Mr. Jarrett?" And I always tell her the same thing. Some words don't need new paint. The folks who used to hide behind HOA bylaws moved away long ago. The ones who stayed built something real. Not a neighborhood, not an association, just a community. They plant together, mend fences together, fix roofs when storms roll through. No board, no titles, no dues, just hands and honesty. And that's more binding than any covenant I've ever read. Sometimes I drive past the old Forest Creek subdivision. The sign's gone now, taken down after the final settlement. All that's left are quiet yards, porches with rocking chairs, kids chasing dogs through sprinklers. No clipboards, no threats, just life. Funny thing is, peace doesn't make noise. It just replaces the kind that used to. I don't go into the center much anymore. Mostly I sit on the porch, watch the wind ripple through the pasture, and listen to the land breathe. The Mustangs graze where the fake boundary lines once were. The dogs nap by my boots. And every sunset, the light turns gold across the fence. The kind of gold you can't buy, only earn. People ask sometimes if I ever think about moving. I tell them no. You don't move away from the place that proved you were right to stand your ground. Last month, Beth brought me a young couple from Dallas. First-time landowners, nervous, eager. She said, "They remind me of you, the way you were when you started all this." The man asked if I had any advice. I told him, "Read every word before you sign. Never ignore your instincts. And if someone tells you they own your land on paper, make them prove it twice." They laughed, but they wrote it down. That's how you know someone's listening. When the sun drops low and the air smells like mesquite and rain, I sometimes think back to that first letter, the one that started everything, how small it looked, how loud it became. And I realize now it wasn't just about land. It was about ownership, of truth, of courage, of what's right. This country's built on boundaries, but the real ones, the ones that matter, live inside a man, where he decides to draw his line and how far he's willing to defend it. So, if you ever find yourself standing on your porch, holding a letter that doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. Don't let fear sign for you. The land remembers who stood up for it, and sometimes, if you listen close enough, you can still hear it thanking you in the wind.